Welcome to the Strategy and Leadership Podcast, the podcast that brings you practical advice, lessons, and stories from senior leaders and thought leaders from around the world. The Strategy and Leadership Podcast is brought to you by SME Strategy, working with organizations around the world to create and implement their strategic plans. To learn more, visit SMEstrategy.net. And now, your host, Anthony Taylor.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Today, my guest is Marga Hoek. She is the author of Tech for Good, Imagine Solving the World's Greatest Challenges. And I say above that, that's part of her work. She's a 3-time CEO. She's a board member. She advises. She speaks. She does tons of cool stuff. She's calling from the Netherlands today. And Marga, how are you today?
I'm really great, Anthony, and thanks for having me on your podcast show.
It's my pleasure. Just looking at all of the different, I'm going to say like cross sections of industry that you work in, that you have worked in. I think it's really, really cool. I love to see the edge of what you're working on, as in what's coming up next isn't even known. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspectives on how you see the world of technology, how you see the world of people, how you see the world of, making impact, and just grateful to have you here. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about you, your background, how you got to where you are, and then we'll just get into a chat.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure, Anthony. So like everyone, I'm on a journey. And, we keep innovating and reinventing ourselves, which is important because as humans, we want to continuously grow and learn. So I tend to look at my life, and in this case, my career in phases, if you will. So the first phase in my life, after graduating and first jobs, and all of that, I became a CEO. And I did that because I thought it was a great pleasure to be able to be privileged, you could even say, to be able to, come up with a vision for a company in the broader world and then lead it and execute on your own vision and see if that actually works in practice, and what it brings you. And also because, it's great to be able to work with a management team and the wider workforce of the company, and to bring something forward, something inspiring, other than just the balance sheet, so to say. So I've done that mainly in the construction and the real estate sector, which was a special thing. I mean, there was barely any woman in that sector, of course, let alone a woman that's leading the company. It never bothered me in any way. I never had problems in any way. So it was a privilege. And throughout those roles in that sector, I actually found out that it's rewarding in many ways as a leader to lead a company, not only for the self-interest of that company, but to have a leadership style that makes the company contribute to ecological, social, and governance challenges. And so in that sense, as a business, you're not part of the problem in the sense of polluting and taking resources, and damaging in any way, but to be the opposite, to be a force for good. And that really caught me on in my leadership period. So let me give you a super simple example. As a CEO in a construction a company, you come to the construction site, where everything actually happens. And then I noticed that a lot of what I called resources, what back then was called waste, was being taken away from the construction site by somebody else, by another company. And I had to pay that company for it. And I thought, this is weird. We're throwing stuff away that's actually valuable goods, because it was like metal and wood and stones, quite valuable materials. And I have to pay another company. They are going to make money on it. And what are they going to do with it? Is it going to be burned? Is it going to be disposed in landfills or whatever? So that was one of the first times that I thought, I'm going to set up a company and I'm going to do this stuff myself. Let's recycle all those materials, bring them back in, see how we can collaborate with other parties that know about, how to upscale waste into resources again. And of course, I'm telling this like a simple thing, which wasn't, of course. But when we set that up, imagine that new company that was actually recycling construction materials grew faster than the other business units. And actually, it wasn't volatile, because you can imagine real estate planning and development is quite a volatile and risky business. So it was stable business. It wasn't volatile. We had a great platform with partners after a while to do it with. First, we did it only for our own company. So it was a division that, supplied our own divisions. But in short time, it was also working with other companies and growing external clients. And in the end, it outperformed all of the rest.
Can you tell me just an idea of scale? How big was the construction company, and how big did the upcycling company get to in terms of people or revenues, just so we can understand
in terms of people, because to be honest, the revenues I can't precisely remember, but in terms of people, it was like in the whole of the company, it was like I think 2,500 people working in the company. In the recycling business, less so, because we had less people to do a bigger job, because we did it via partnering and not only by having everybody on our own payroll. But in terms of percentages of turnover, I do remember it started at 2% and it ended up at 35 of the total.
Wow.
So that's significant. I just give this example because then everybody can relate to it, because sometimes things are really simple and not very complex. So I did that and many other things. We built houses and any other buildings. And at that time it was said, oh, you have to, diminish your footprint. So reduce the carbon emissions needed for the fossil energy used in the life cycle of those houses and buildings. And then I said, oh, we can do that in a different way. Let's just see what we can grasp together in terms of technologies. And where do we end up then? And very early on, we had, zero emission houses. And by now we have positive impact houses that are actually, CO2 negative instead of CO2 positive. So all those are kinds of things I did. And then I was asked, and that's the second phase of my career, to set up and lead the Dutch Sustainable Business Association, and later on that internationalized, to lead the dialogue between businesses and governments, because, it's like playing a new game with old rules. Everybody knows that doesn't work. Our tax system, for instance, taxes labor instead of resources and pollution, which is crazy, because, you get what you reward. And so we get the wrong thing. So I worked on that a long time. And in that role, I had the privilege with over 400 member companies to see so much of so many businesses in so many different sectors. And that actually motivated to write my first book, because I thought, I see all the pieces of the puzzle, so I can make the puzzle, but many people see only a couple of parts of the puzzle and are not able to complete the puzzle. So let me do that and share, those ideas and those overarching insights and vision. And the next book was The $1 Trillion Shift, because by that time, the Sustainable Development Goals had been set in 2015. And then I thought, this is hugely important. This is a great opportunity. And let me write my first international book on that.
One of the things that I heard, just in terms of like looking at your mantra and your approach. So you're running this construction company, obviously having to deal with the things of a woman leading a construction company that we won't get into in this podcast. Then you saw this opportunity internally, turned it into a great business, but also recognized that you didn't have to do everything. Your next business was rallying around, like, you get people to the table. It sounds like in the short amount of time we've been speaking, your gift is really being able to put those puzzle pieces together, but the pieces are the people. And so your advisory, your communication, like, it's all very collaborative to solve, problems. So I want to talk about that later. My kind of parking lot question is, how did the impact of like working, living, being Dutch, being in the Netherlands impact the ability to drive, sustainable solutions? Because there, compared to North America, it is such a different mindset around how we do it, how we look at waste, how we look at, the use of resources. That from a North American lens that I have, when people are like, oh yeah, let's look at carbon. And then you have other people that says like climate change is a hoax, or, we have unlimited resources, don't worry about it. So anyways, culturally, I think it's fascinating. Listening to your leadership sounds especially collaborative, and please keep going. 2 books, 1 international book. near the end of the phase of career, phase 2. Keep going.
Thank you, Anthony. So, well, he actually made Knightsbridges. So that once I phased out of the business association, both in the Netherlands and globally, then I went on to do non-executive roles in boards and chairs, a lot in the financial sector, because I very much believe in redirecting capital. I mean, that's everywhere where the power lies the responsibility and the opportunity. So I find it important to work in that sector. And alongside, I do board consulting and a lot of keynote speaking. And I do write the books, because I think it's important that we as people continue to learn, that we share knowledge, that we gain knowledge, and that we know more than the obvious.
Well, so I think one of the things that's very cool about your career path, and now you've transcended into those phases, and looking backwards, it's obvious. Looking forward, less obvious. But what I heard you do is you looked at an innovation that was a necessity, a need. It was low-hanging fruit, and you didn't even think about it internally. And I think that that's how some of the best company innovations, they start small, because there's an existing need, there's a great idea, there's a great opportunity. And for you, like, the vertical integration made absolute sense. Now you've gone through, your scope is so much broader. You are looking and engaging both in your own brain, the brains of others, to be on the forefront of what's happening in industry. So if we look at this and, it's December 2023 and you're looking forward, what are some of the things that you're seeing? What are some of the things that are on the top of your mind? What are some of those opportunities that you're in the process of connecting the dots on, that you want our listeners to think about and to start preparing for potentially?
Yeah, well, huge questions. So one thing, of course, what drives my mission, my personal mission, if you will, Anthony, is to make happen that, how I call it, business for good. So that's business that's both good for business as well as the world, which can be done in a financial positive way, becomes the norm and not the exception. That's what drives me. That's what I want to see done. Because, if you look, for instance, at the 100 largest economies in the world by revenue, 100 largest economies in the world by revenue, imagine that 69 are companies and not countries. So that's a huge power, that's huge capital. And if we leverage that in a good way, we can create a better world for everybody. And that's my mission. So that's also my red thread through everything that I do. And I can advise everyone, it makes life so much easier if you have a purpose, because that's my purpose. And looking at that purpose and then looking what's happening around me brought me to write Tech for Good, because technology can be our biggest ally in the transition towards a more sustainable society. Our biggest ally. We don't treat it as such, but it can be. It has the potential to do that. And I think we're at a pivotal moment in time. We are just crossing over the threshold of the fourth industrial revolution, and which might sound like a buzzword, but it is actually very relevant, because it means that we enter an era in which we have both digital and physical technologies, a wide range of solutions that blend into bigger solutions. And I think people are not so aware of what technology can do, how broad it actually is, how many different technologies that actually exist, and how they can actually help us enormously in this transition that we all should want. I mean, nobody can be against that, but it's more like how we're going to action it and how we're really going to lead through that transition. So one topic that is very important to me is, to leverage fourth industrial revolution technologies for the greater good. That's why I wrote the book. A thing that is very important related to that, might sound as a totally different topic, but is very important, is trust. Because, I can say technology has the potential of being our biggest ally. It can do so many good things, But if trust in technology, and then I mean not the mechanical technology, so trust if technology can do what it set out to, but trust in the intentions and the parties behind it, relational trust, is at an all-time low. And we still have a lot of people applying tech with bad intentions, not with an ethical intent. So trust and the intentions of people, these have to change. We have to be more aware. Guys, we have very little time for huge challenges. So we can't waste anything, albeit resources or technology. We have to redirect capital, resources, technology to contribute, not to damage. So that is an important thing in my agenda. And I just try to contribute as much as I can by writing these books, by sharing the vision, and hopefully by inspiring many people around the globe. You know, sometimes that's big audiences, and sometimes that's a board that's, whether it's voluntarily or forced upon them, is locked up in a room for a couple of days with me to help support this movement.
So let me, if I kind of take a step back. So I hear that, you know, what you're seeing in your lens is the fourth industrial revolution. It's been a little while since I've studied it, but I do remember there's the agricultural revolution, there's some other technological, there's like the machining revolution, there was a third, and now there's the fourth, like this technology. And they were all just technologies. I believe the first three were obvious to the most people. You say, hey, we can plant crops in a different way, and we're going to get a much better yield. We can use coal-powered machines to increase our productivity, XYZ. Now, with these technologies, blockchain, quantum computing, like anything else that you come behind there, the challenge now is that, the speed of change is happening so fast that it is more uncomfortable for folks, and the overall social fabric where there is division, where there's uncertainty, where there is such differences in perspectives and realities, that intersecting that, it is maybe rightfully slowing down some technological innovation, but also because there's so much to learn, it's hard for everybody to be on that same page, on the same pace, and then which probably creates the opportunity or ability for more bad actors to fall into it, because we don't have that same common societal goal. Everybody is self-interested. So I find that very interesting. How do you see the intersection, or I guess you mentioned it, the intersection of trust and technology, and I guess most importantly, I'm gonna ask you a very direct question, what do our listeners need to consider when looking at implementing new technology or the state of trust in industry?
Yeah, well, the trust we create, all of us together, huh? So each and every one of us needs to redirect the role of technology, and we all have different roles in that, being a consumer, being a producer, being in the tech area or not being in the tech area, or government or business. And that's a whole ecosystem that we need to direct. And it's not easy, but it must be done. To your point, what you mentioned, the differences between the different industrial revolutions. Yeah, that's very true. You know, with former industrial revolutions, it was one or two or three big things. So that's understandable. You know, it was a couple of inventions, and then you knew what they were going to do, and that was simple. Although the consequences were huge, of course. You only need to think about, you know, globalization of all these supply chains, for instance, and moving stuff around the globe entirely as a consequence. And now we need to perceive things very differently, because it's a wide range of technologies. It's not even 8 technologies. I mean, I describe 8 in my book, but those are 8 technology groups. It's a way of grouping all kinds of technology. So if you only think about robotics, for instance, there's not one type of robot, it's a whole spectrum. If you think of virtual reality, it's augmented reality, virtual reality, a combination of both, and so on. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because if I read all these tech books, it daunts me. And I wanted to write in a simple way, yet authoritative, what these technologies actually are, how do the economics look like, how can it be applied, and then most importantly, explain to everyone, okay, now you have here this technology, how can it be applied for good?
Mm.
Because I think we need to make people more aware, how can they be applied for good? And in most cases, these technologies combine, and then, multi-tech solutions come about. What do we need to do, you asked? I would wish that more business people were truly purpose-driven. Now, this is also becoming a buzzword, so let's talk a little bit about what it actually really is. Being purpose-driven means that you start with the purpose. It's not to do what you did with your company and then go to the marketing department and said, well, add a nice purpose to this. That's not what it is. Although that happens a lot, huh? That's green wishing and becomes greenwashing. But being truly purpose-driven is looking at, okay, what can be the authentic, ethical values that the company has to address any of these sustainable development goals? Because we have that, system of 17 goals, which makes actually our life easy, because that's the holistic definition of sustainability with a timeline. So start with what really, is important to you as a person or as a company. What are you going to contribute to? And then the rest follows, but you start with the purpose. And then you look, okay, but we are good in science, or we have those kinds of solutions, or we have access to those kinds of clients. I mean, IKEA thinks from the perspective, all those consumers come in our stores. So we can have a great role of making people more aware that they can be part of a circular economy and that they can buy in our stores renewable energy solutions. DSM, which is a former coal mine company in the south of the Netherlands, transferred first into a bulk chemical company, still not very good. And then they really repurposed and thought, but what can we do? And it became a science-based solution company for the animal sector, for people, for health, for food. And they brought only people, planet plus solutions. Interface Group, a company in the US listed, they have carpet tiles. They said, we don't want to be only neutral. Neutral is not good, actually, because it doesn't solve anything for real. So when they went on a mission zero and achieved it earlier on, said, and now we actually want to be part of reversing the damage that has been done on people and planet. And so they came with innovative products like climate take back, which is very, very well branded as well, and networks, all kinds of projects where they actually had a positive impact on the world. And there's so many more companies that do that. And if you're truly purpose-driven, then you'll also look that way at technology. Because then you'll think, how can technology help solving challenges in the world? And how can I combine my business with that to create that synergy? If we do that, we'll get there.
Yeah. I think that's super cool. I sidebar, I used to be the chair of a green chamber of commerce. And the belief was like, how can business do those things? That was 10 years ago. We actually had a lot of great Dutch people in that group, which I found the connection so interesting. But, looking at, I had never heard of, there's a lot that you shared there. I had never heard of, the 8 technology kind of sectors groups, like, about them intellectually, but I think a lot of people just like bulk them into like AI or just technology as a whole. And looking at them distinctly, I think will help teams utilize it more, but utilizing it is way down the line.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found interesting about that is because the advancement is, I'll use the word disparate, but some people have such a leg up that it's kind of like the idea of international trade, free trade, or specialization, is that different people have specialties. And then how can you get all those people at the table to all use it in the right way? So again, going back to technology, there's of course the if you do well, you will make more money. But the whole positive, what you're saying is you have to start with wanting to do good. The money will come after versus trying to fake it. But true to your core, there are likely natural opportunities in what you're doing to evolve to do work, so long as you and your team begin with the intention of doing work,
Exactly.
good work,
Yeah.
seeing what you can do from there, and then social benefit. You'll have people benefit because like people want to do good work, so you'll attract those right people, and then of course you'll make money. Time flies when you're having fun, Marga. I know you've got, probably we could talk for hours, I'm sure.
Absolutely. We've only just started.
We have just started, but as we land the plane here, I'll tell you what. Why don't you give a parting thought to our folks, to our listeners? What do you want them to consider? What do you want them to reflect on as teams, in their teams? Tell people about your book. Of course, I'm sure they can get it on the internet somewhere. And then maybe we just have to have another conversation about trends in the future. And
let's do that. Absolutely. Well, maybe as a kind of an afterthought, if you will. Why did I write this book? If you write a book and after you've finished, then the real thought comes why you did it, because then you rise above it and you think, what is now actually underlying most important? And that's when I came to the subtitle, which is Imagine, and then Tech for Good, solving the world's greatest challenge. And why did I say that? And I actually added a page to every chapter saying imagine, and then sketching an image, what people should imagine. And why did I do that? In this era of doom and gloom and fear and threats, I feel that people lost the opportunity and the ability to really imagine what can be done instead of dwelling on what cannot be done. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important, start with hope, start with confidence, then think from challenges, get technology in, be open-minded to collaborate with, unsuspected parties. It makes life much nicer, if you collaborate with people you don't know yet and organizations you don't know yet. And imagine what can be done, and more possibilities will open up to you. Now, think about coral reef, just one example. Our coral reef will disappear within a decade by 99% if we don't radically change as a result of pollution and climate change. Now we have 3D printing technologies that are able to restore coral reefs that have gone lost. I mean, that's such a beautiful thing, because it can be done in such a way that the life underwater, the bio ecosystem, believes it's coral reef, so to say. So they inhabit it and they let it grow, and so we can restore things. I mean, having said that, of course, we should stop polluting, but we are able to recover things. If we can do that, imagine what we can do more. There's so much that can be done. Now, with changing generations, with Millennial Z and Millennials, Generation Z, soon to be the majority of the workforce and the marketplace, they come with a higher sense of purpose than former generations, and they're either tech savvy or tech native. In other words, they combine those two things much more so than former generations, and what this book is precisely about. But it also predicts your future. If as a company, you dare to be really purpose-driven and you really build a portfolio of products and services aligned with that, you use technology, you have the clients and the employees, the managers, the CEOs, the investors of the future on your side.
I love it. I think it's a great consideration for all leadership teams, all individuals, as you look at, hey, what do you want your life to be about? What do you want your opportunity to be about? And I think a great takeaway to recognize it is not an end all be all, because you've demonstrated it, that your life comes in phases. So recognizing that whatever phase you're at is perfect. Marga, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for chatting with me. Again, I know that we could chat for a lot long, but thank you, El. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to the next time.
Me too. Thank you, Anthony.
Excellent. Folks, my guest today is Marga Hoek, and she has written the book Business as a Force for Good. And so I think that if you look and say, or Tech for Good rather, imagine solving the world's greatest challenges, I think it's a really great opportunity to reflect on what you can do. And I think the takeaway that I have from Margarita's career, Marga's career, is that it didn't come as a home run right away. It was a small incremental change, started with intent, that evolved into this tremendous opportunity. So all of us have the power to make a small, large impact quickly. And I think if we can all do that, we can both do good for the planet, which is important, good for people, and of course, make money at the same time, the triple bottom line. So Marga, thank you for being here again. Appreciate it. My name's Anthony Taylor. This has been the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to comment, share, tell your folks about it so that we can all build a great piece of a puzzle around the world. So thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider giving us a review. We appreciate you listening and following along, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. And as Anthony says, until next time.